This is the Kinefinity Mavo Edge, their new flagship cinema camera with a stunning full-frame 8K sensor, a newly designed modular carbon fiber body, and a whole host of fantastic little design touches which make this a very exciting new camera. It's been a long wait from the first time that Kinefinity announced this camera back in April 2020, nearly a year and a half ago now. For obvious reasons, launching products over the last year or so hasn't been the easiest process for any manufacturer, let alone small ones like Kinefinity. So there might have been a wait, but it is finally ready now. This is a final production quality model here in my hands, and customer ones are now shipping as well. I've been very excited for this camera. We have a long history now with Kinefinity, and their last cameras, although far from perfect, were some of my favourites on the market for some specific use cases. The image quality from the Mavo LF, Mavo 6K and Terra 4K was just fantastic. And the small modular form factor with interchangeable lens mounts made them incredibly flexible. But on those models, the build quality was a little rough around the edges in places, to be honest. Not to say it was bad. If you knew how to avoid the weak spots, they were actually built very well and very reliable. We have customers who have used them in all kinds of situations, including taking them around the globe from ice caves to volcanoes with no issues, when their other cameras from other brands were actually giving up on them in the same environment. But they just didn't feel that premium, I guess. The Mavo Edge, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. This thing feels great, just as good as any other high-end camera manufacturer out there. And they have added so many lovely touches to the design, which I think will take people who haven't seen the Edge before by surprise. I'll go over these as we cover each area of the camera, and they really add up to make this a camera which is actually much nicer to use than some of those other high-end cinema cameras out there. And in terms of comparing it to their older cameras, it's just a whole new league for Kinefinity. It's a bit heavier because of this. It weighs 1.5 kilos, and that's slightly more than the Mavo LF, but it's hardly a surprise as it packs in a huge amount of extra functionality, and 1.5 kilos is still pretty lightweight, let's be honest. It's light, but with a reassuring weight to it, if that makes sense. But let's start with the sensor. It's an 8K CMOS sensor which measures 36 by 24 millimeters. So that's the same dimensions as their Mavo LF and actually the Sony Venice. It's very slightly smaller than the Alexa Mini LF, and it's taller but not as wide as the Canon C500 Mark II or Red Monstro. Now, Kinefinity claim it has over 14 stops of dynamic range, and it has a dual native ISO of 640 and 2560. The Edge records in ProRes files, ranging from ProRes 422 LT for small, easy-to-use files, all the way up to ProRes 444 XQ, which is an incredibly robust industry-standard codec. Now, there's no RAW in the camera right now. When they announced it, they were planning to have ProRes RAW support internally, but unfortunately that never came to fruition due to various legal reasons. They're apparently looking at ways of getting RAW into the camera, but for now we have good old-fashioned ProRes. But to be honest, I don't think that really bothers me. The quality of this ProRes recording is just fantastic. So much so that there's a definite school of thought out there that ProRes 444 will actually give you just as much flexibility in the grade as RAW would, but without the extra workflow requirements. Nevertheless though, it would be great to get RAW recording for those who want it, so hopefully Kine can find a way to make that happen. You can record 8K with the full sensor at up to 55 frames a second, which is very impressive and is a higher max resolution and max frame rate than pretty much any of its competition, except the Red Monstro, which can do that at 60 frames. So not that much higher really. Crop that down to their wider aspect ratio, which works out as 2.42 to 1 in 8K, and you can get up to 70 frames a second. Now, you don't have to record in 8K with the full sensor though. you can oversample the image to 4K and still get up to 55 frames a second. Now this oversampled 4K recording is remarkably good. In fact, Kine actually say that this is the way to get the best dynamic range out of the camera. We did a bunch of tests comparing the two, and the oversampled 4K is very nearly as detailed as the 8K, and it definitely lowers the noise floor down. We couldn't see much difference in highlight retention, so this lower noise floor will be what Kinefinity are referring to. You're going to get cleaner shadows with the oversampled 4K, and so therefore a slightly wider usable dynamic range. Now this is great because for many people using the full 8K resolution is simply going to be too much data for them. If you want to treat this as a large format 4K camera, you absolutely can. In fact, the only reason to really step up to the 8K is if you want to do any cropping or reframing, of course. You want that slight extra bit of detail and that's really important to you. Or you want the highest resolution possible for archival reasons. For everyone else, just recording that 4K mode and that in-camera 8K oversampling is going to give you very detailed, very clean images. If you want to go to higher frame rates, you can do that by cropping into the sensor. Crop into Super 35mm and you can get 6K up to 72 frames or 92 frames in the wide mode. Go in even further to Super 16 and you can get up to 108 frames in 4K or 145 in 4K wide or 215 in 2K and 280 in 2K wide. These are good frame rates to have, but by this point though, you are significantly cropped into the sensor. One nice touch, which I'm very pleased to see again, as it was one of my favourite features of their previous camera's design, is a quick access presets menu. Now this makes it incredibly quick and easy to jump between your most regularly used settings. Hold button 1 down and you get this list of up to 8 presets to choose from. This sets your sensor size, resolution, codec and frame rate, and it can be set up however you like. It's fantastic to use, especially when you're jumping between different frame rates a lot. We also did a quick test of the higher ISOs while using our shutter speed to keep the exposure consistent so that we can compare noise levels directly. Here's the two native ISOs next to each other, and both look great. There's slightly more noise on the higher one, but nothing really to worry about for most people, I don't think. It also does really quite well at higher ISOs, only really getting that noticeably noisy at around 12,800, which is pretty good, especially considering this is an 8K camera. I haven't compared it to the Mavo LF directly yet, but I expect the LF to be better, as it's always been exceptionally good. But this is nothing to be ashamed of at all on the Edge. I'd say that this should rival and even potentially beat most of those other high-end cinema cameras in terms of noise performance at high ISOs. Now let's take a look at the physical aspects of the camera, starting with the lens mount. This is exactly the same system as on their previous cameras. The camera itself has their own Kine mount, which has a very short flange distance on it. And you can actually use this to mount their own cinema lenses on now, which is nice, but I think most people will be using one of these mount adapters to give the camera either an EF mount, PL, LPL mount, or even an E mount from Sony, although that one is for manual lenses only. This is a fantastic system, as it lets owners use a huge variety of glass from small and affordable EF lenses all the way up to the highest end cinema primes. Kinefinity have also hugely improved these lens mounts with the new Mark III versions, especially the EF mount ones, but I'll cover that in more detail in another video. There's now no longer any need for the mount adapters which have the built-in ND filters as well, as the Edge now has an electronic variable ND system actually built into the camera itself, which is very impressive in a camera this compact. You can go from 2 stops to 7 stops of ND in very small and precise increments, no matter what lens or mount combination you're using, which is just fantastic to have built into a camera like this. Although Sony do have their fantastic electronic ND filter, it's not on their Venice. Just like the Alexa LF and the C500 Mark II, the Venice has built-in optical ND filters that drop down in presets, while the Reds of course don't have any ND at all. Having the fine control that an electronic ND gives you is just fantastic to have for quick work. Some productions will of course want to still use a matte box and proper optical NDs that they know and that they trust, but for most people, the convenience of having a built-in variable ND will be a huge, huge benefit. On the side are your controls and a status screen to show you your current settings. Now this camera isn't on final firmware yet, but on my model this screen is quite slow to update when you're changing settings, so you have to use the main displays really to see what you're doing. But hopefully Kine can speed that up over time in future firmwares. This wheel is how you navigate your menu system, and the actual menus themselves are the same as they were on previous cameras. And despite the controls to navigate them actually being significantly better, they are still a little clumsy in my opinion. Your control wheel is here, with a central button to select things, but the quality of this wheel just doesn't seem to match the rest of the camera, which is quite a shame. It feels just a little bit loose and fiddly. But the bigger problem is actually the control scheme. You get a menu button to get into the menus of course, but then when you want to go backwards in the menus, you have to find that menu button again, and then to leave the menus, you have to press that menu button multiple times in order to get back out of each stage of the menu. Playback mode is also really quite unintuitive. It works well, but the button layout can just be hard to remember. You hold the play button to get into playback, the wheel jogs backwards and forwards, and going back to the play button starts and stops the clip. Button 1 and 2 then jump forwards and backwards through the clips, but there's no list of the clips available to navigate with or anything like that. There's definitely scope here for this to be slightly more refined, and this control system is probably my least favourite part of the camera, to be honest. But it does get the job done, and changing your actual exposure settings while you're recording is simple and straightforward and fast, which is definitely the most important thing. Now next to these controls are the card slots, which are another big area of change and a great example of those nice small little touches that I mentioned at the start. Rather than the long thin SSD drives that the previous cameras used, the Edge now uses NVMe SSD drives inside an enclosure. Kinefinity sell the KineMag Nano, which is this one here, and it's a 1TB SSD, but they also will release a Caddy, which you can put your own drives into. Now this is a fantastic balance, I think, between getting faster, more sturdy, more reliable and smaller media, but still keeping that flexibility for the user in order to use more affordable third-party options if they want to. Plus, because they're physically much smaller, you can now fit 2 of them into the camera, giving us relay recording. But unfortunately right now you can't record to both simultaneously. If the camera is capable of it, and I think Kinefinity are looking at adding this, I would love to see it added, even if it's only for the lower codec options like ProRes LT or ProRes 422 for example. Just having a backup recording option is very important on some jobs. I would love to see that added. These new nano drives are really nicely made though, and a perfect example of those little touches. They fit into the slots perfectly, yet are really easy to just grab and pull out. There's even a little felt back to the door itself to stop the drives from rubbing against it. The best part though is that the drives have a little USB-C port built into the side of them. This means you can offload to your computer or watch the files back on a laptop without any need for a card reader or anything like that. It is fast, convenient, and a very, very welcome, nice little touch. This convenience and attention to detail extends to the back of the camera as well, where you'll find the battery mounts. Now there's no need for a back module anymore like on their older cameras. We now have battery mounts directly built into the camera itself. And I say battery mounts, not because you can mount multiple batteries, but because there's a V-lock mount with a Sony BPU style battery plate hidden to one side inside it. This gives you the choice between large V-lock batteries and smaller BPU batteries like their own grip bats, the same ones that they were using in the side grip on their previous cameras. I love this. It's a really clever way of giving customers more ways of powering the camera. And using those smaller batteries is going to be great for gimbals or handheld work, anything where you want to keep the weight and size down. Plus, each battery should power the camera for well over an hour as well. Kinefinity's grip bats are 45 watt hours and the camera itself draws 32. Moving around the camera again, we get to the in and out ports. Kinefinity have effectively built in the whole functionality of their previous Kineback modules into the actual camera itself this time. On the top are two full-size XLR inputs. Then on the side, we get a Wi-Fi antenna, which is used to connect to their app for monitoring and camera control. I'll cover that in a future video. There's two SDI ports, Genlock as a BNC, and timecode as a 5-pin LEMO. There's a sync port as well for jamming multiple cameras together, and of course a headphone port. For power, there's a 2-pin DC in for mains power, a 12-volt 3-pin LEMO output, and a 12-volt DTAP port. This leaves the USB-C port and an Ethernet port, and then these two areas here on the side which are marked as extension ports and then covered by these screwed-on metal caps. Information on these ports is fairly limited right now. We know the USB-C is used for firmware updates, and on their website they say that it can be used for monitoring on iOS devices instead of using the Wi-Fi, which is interesting, although I don't think that's enabled yet. The website also says that the Ethernet port can be used for live streaming, camera control and data transfer, although again, I believe that's coming in a future update. I think the plan from Kinefinity is to get the core of the camera working well at the start before then changing focus to work on these extra features, which is definitely the right approach if it can't all be there at launch, and I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what is added to the camera over time with these ports. Beyond that, there is a whole ecosystem of other products that Kinefinity make around the camera. There's the monitors, the EVF, there's the batteries, the rigging kit which Movcam make for them. There's a lot more to talk about, and there's some really nice touches in some of these things, including this UPS uninterruptible power base plate which runs off MPF batteries. There's lots more to talk about, and we're going to cover it in the next video that we make on the Edge. But for now, I'm really keen to hear what you all think. Let me know in the comment section what you think of the Edge and its features. How do you think this will stack up against its competition from Red, from Arri, from Canon and Sony? And what would you like to see from us now that we have a working module ourselves? I'm keen to know what you think, because I've been hugely impressed with the camera so far. In terms of first impressions, it is certainly the best camera that Kinefinity themselves have ever made by quite a long way, and in my opinion, definitely a solid contender in that high-end cinema camera market. If you want to buy one for yourself, you can of course head over to proov.co.uk or just talk to our sales team directly. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.